Hello again, and welcome to this section on designing compute solutions. In this section, we're going to be covering Azure Compute, microservices, containers, and choosing solutions for compute infrastructure. All right, to start with, we're going to talk about choosing an Azure Compute service. Now, there are several of these available, and basically, you're going to want to choose a hosting model for the resources on which your applications are going to run. So depending on what your app does or what the goal is, will determine what sort of compute service you end up using. And as with all planning and review activities, you need to know your end goal. If you don't know where you're going, then it's going to be difficult to choose how to get there. So this is a flowchart for compute service selection. Now, I'm not going to walk through every step of this. The main things that you'll need to know, your differences, primarily, is going to be, are you migrating services or are you building new? You'll find that if you are migrating services, you have some pretty limited end results that you're going to be working with, primarily app services, VMs, Kubernetes. And if you are building new, then of course you can pretty much design for any kind of compute service you like. So let's take a look at the hosting models that we're going to have available to choose from. We're looking at three categories here. Infrastructure as a service, that's provisioning VMs and associated network and storage components. This is the typical infrastructure stuff that you have probably done 1,000 times over. Next, you have platform as a service. So that's managed hosting. That's deploying, an app service or a database without a VM or any dedicated networking that has been pre-configured for that purpose. And lastly, you have functions as a service. And that's just that, deploying code to Azure Functions, and Azure Functions runs it for you in whatever schedule you want. Now, you may be wondering, what about software as a service? Well, software as a service is actually a subset of platform as a service and therefore does not get its own category. So the compute options you have available to you are as follows. Virtual machines. Well, that's nothing else needs to be said about that. Kubernetes, also known as AKS, and that's the Azure service for running containerized applications. Container instances, which is a no VM required, includes Service Fabric, and it's just that. It's just a container that you fire off quick and dirty, and there's not a whole lot of extra planning that's involved in it. Of course, app services, primarily for hosting web apps, RESTful APIs, backends, automated business processes, etc. You have batch processing, and that's for running high-performance computing operations, so large-scale parallel jobs, and that can be pretty expensive when you're running HPC, so you want to definitely be aware of your costs whenever you're running batch services. And of course, Azure Functions. And whatever your application end goal is going to be, it's going to land somewhere inside these 6 options. And so you'll, if you go back to the flowchart for compute service selection, you'll see kind of a breakdown of what's going to land you into what compute service. And that's it for the quick overview of compute service selection. In the next video, we'll be taking a look at compute options for microservices. Hope to see you there.